Okay, Joss Stone, tell me all about your podcast, please.
All right. Okay, so we started it because we wanted to just help people feel happy, and I don't really know how. So I thought I will ask everyone that does know how.
Yeah.
And so the guests, they range from, well, starting with like illusionist Darren Brown, who knows
Yeah.
how to manipulate people's minds, and has written a book called Happy, and then going to sex therapist Laura Berman. Any therapist is great to have on.
Yeah.
My goodness, they know
How
so
do you
much.
deal with that though? When they're like,
Um,
when they're getting a therapy head on, are you thinking, I'm going to be really careful what I say here? Are they like,
yeah.
are they digging deep in my brain here?
Sometimes I'm really like, I have to stop myself from just talking about me. Like, what are you doing, Josh? Stop it. I'm like, oh, well, let me tell you the story. And this happened to me that time. No, I have to really quell that because the listeners don't want to hear all that. They want to hear about something that's more general so they can actually take something from it.
Yeah.
So every now and then I pop in my little stories, but really it's about asking the guests questions because they have so much knowledge, so much wisdom. Um, I mean, there was one guy, he was the CEO of the Institute of Happiness in Denmark. What an interesting job.
What an interesting place. What's the Institute of Happiness?
The Institute of Happiness, yeah, it's his office, I imagine. I imagine it's an office.
That's a theme park that I want to go to.
Yeah, it sounds amazing, doesn't it? But so they advise the government on how to make the right decisions for their people. Isn't that great?
Wow.
We all need this. We
Yeah.
need this in every country. You know, I just think, yeah, it is a very interesting podcast. I mean, the last guy I spoke to, he was taking on, his name was Robert Waldinger, and he was taking on a study, the longest study on people ever. So he was like the 8th or 9th person to take it on. Over 70, 80 years, they had, I think, 100 blokes from Boston, and they had interviewed them their entire lives
Yeah.
and their families. And they were trying to figure out, right, what makes people happiest? And what came out was, amongst other things, was the quality of your relationships with people is like right up there. It's not money or what house you live in or even where you live or if you're hot or cold or what you eat or how healthy you are. It's about your relationships and the quality of them. So I thought that was quite interesting. There's loads of little tidbits. I love it.
So we obviously know Joss Stone as superstar singer. How did podcasting enter into the world? How did that happen for you?
Well, I just thought all my gigs have gone because no one would let us come together, which is a
Yeah.
really annoying thing. And that was my tool to kind of help people feel good. I feel like that's my job. So I
Yeah.
wanted to continue doing my job. I just needed a different tool. So that's why we started that.
And how did you find that, like, during the sort of the lockdown of interviewing people, but doing what you do and what we know you for doing, like, you must be so used to being the interviewee and not the interviewer. Like,
Yeah.
how was that initially?
Oh, that's so true. Um, so I learned how to do it, and it is a learnt skill. It's actually kind of difficult because you've got to keep thinking while someone's talking. So you can't just like go into it like you're sat outside having a cup of tea with someone. You got to think, right.
You're giving podcasters too much credit there. If you could see into my head now, it's just one of them little monkeys with cymbals just clapping. That's all that's going on.
I doubt it. I doubt it. So I started doing this the world tour like 6-7 years ago, and the point of it was to play every country in the world just one gig. And then we added to that 2 more jobs. One was to collaborate with someone from that country in their language, in their style, which was just my selfish way of enjoying their music. And the other one was to visit good people doing good things. So that took us to charities. And that meant that I had to become the interviewer. And at first, for the first, I would say 6 months, I was like, oh, I'm not very good at this at all. Like, I was talking over people, which I still do, but much, much less. And I I didn't really know how to prep for it, but I learned. And then I thought, well, I've done that now. I'll do a podcast, use my new skill.
One of the things looking through the back catalogue of the podcast is you mentioned a few guests there. I mean, there's some incredibly amazing guests in that back catalogue. I mean, what I'll say is, I'm going to ask you this, Josh. So if you had to, a new listener's listening to this now and he's going to go and check out the podcast, would you say, just go at the very beginning and listen to them all? Or would you say, do you know what? If you're going to give it one spin, listen to this episode, because I felt with this episode, I really captured everything I wanted to do with a podcast. Is there one? I know it's like picking your favourite child.
Oh, it's so hard, isn't it?
But is there one where you, when it finishes, you thought, oh, do you know what? That was exactly what I wanted from the podcast.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's because everyone is so different and everybody finds happiness in different ways. It's like impossible to say. That's why it's important to have a plethora of different people.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, I've got my favorite chats.
Yeah.
But you know, so one of my favorite chats was with Jo Frost, the super nanny.
Yeah.
And of course, it's one of my favorite chats because she's an awesome girl. It's girls chatting together. And also, I was pregnant when I was talking to her, just about to have a little one, you know, so it really worked for me. And then there was another lady, a sex therapist called Laura Berman, that I loved talking. I just thought she was like my soul sister.
Yeah.
But that's for me, I loved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's people that really enjoy data. And that's where Robert Waldinger comes in with that long study that he's been part of. And then there's like clairvoyance and oh God, we had Uri Geller on the other day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we had him. And that's for people that are really into like psychic stuff, spirituality, you know. So I would have to get to know the person that I'm talking to, and then I could suggest something. It's almost like a bit of medicine, isn't it? Like, which one works for you?
Are you finding that you're getting medicine from this? Are you finding from having all these chats, all these amazing people that are talking about, you know, increasing happiness and such? Are you finding that, you know, you're drawing from that?
Yeah, 100%. I'm probably getting more out of it than everyone else. I really have to look into the people, you know, and often I don't know who they are beforehand because they're not. I'm deliberately trying not to just choose famous people, just celebrities to get people to listen because, you know, especially musicians, we don't know how to be happy. We're a bag of emotions. You know, our whole job is to just emote.
Yeah.
It isn't to be balanced.
Yeah.
No. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be kind of extremely feeling this happiness or extremely feeling this sadness. Because that's how you make a good song or paint a great picture or whatever. So to interview people that are just from the music industry is not a good plan. Yeah. So I have to interview like psychologists. I would never have known them before. So I look them up and try and come up with some interesting questions and not sound so stupid. It's very, very difficult. High pressure.
So, Joss, you're someone who's very comfortable on a stage. And so what we're seeing, certainly like hugely in the UK at the moment, is podcasters taking their podcast to the stage. Is that something you'd be interested to do in the future?
Oh, my gosh. Wow. Doesn't that defeat the purpose of the podcast? I like the idea. I mean, I'll give it a go, but that's more of a TV show.
I kind of guess so. I mean, a lot of them record them and then put them out as a podcast as well.
Well, it's kind of nice. It's like the Opry, you know, down the road, there's this venue. There's two venues here in Tennessee that people love. One's the Ryman and the other one is the Opry. Right. And the Opry every Saturday is live for the last 100 years or something like that. They never missed a gig. And it's like, you know, when you go to a gig, you feel, especially if it's a small one, you feel like this is just for you. Yeah. This is a very special moment. That's just a personal kind of like back and forth with the person on stage. Yeah. But you can share that with millions of people if you want now. Yeah. You know, so yeah, it is different. I remember doing radio shows and going in my pajamas and not giving a shit about whether I had makeup on. And now everything's bloody filmed, you know, so you got to brush your hair, put some lippy on. It's like a different world. So yeah, no, why not chuck a podcast on stage?
There you go. There you go. And so moving forward and looking ahead, what plans have you got with the podcast?
Well, I'm just going to keep going as long as people like it, really.
Yeah.
And when they start saying, "Oh my God, this is the worst podcast in the world," I'll be like, "Okay, I'll do something else."
Have you got a bucket list of guests that you'd like on that you haven't had on yet?
Yes, there is. I would like to have Joe Rogan on because he's interviewed so many interesting people
Yeah.
purely for his podcast, and he's quite funny.
Yeah.
But I would love to have Jordan Peterson on.
Oh, that'd be an interesting one.
Wouldn't it be good?
Mm.
I don't think I've got enough people from like a harsher perspective. And, you know, I really like that he is not concerned about offending people. He just says what he knows or thinks and feels to be true. And he's super intelligent and he's got a lot of data to back it up. I enjoy that.
Yeah.
But I know he's so controversial, but that's only because everyone's all super sensitive.
Yeah.
And that is something on our podcast. Of course, our podcast is called A Cup of Happy. We want everyone to feel happy and thought about. However, that doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I sometimes need more of a straight talk.
Yeah.
And we need more of that on our podcast for sure. And in fact, I realized we needed it. So I called my dad. I was like, "Dad, I need balance. Can you come on my podcast, please?"
You got your dad on. Amazing.
I got him on. And he was like, "I don't know. I have no idea. We need to edit that stuff." He was like, "You can do whatever the fuck you like." I'm like, "Okay. Oh my God, Dad, I love you. This is going to be hilarious." You know, so I think people will get something out of having a bit of both. You need soft.
Absolutely.
Harsh. I've had both throughout my life, and it's
all about balance. It's all about balance.
Totally.
Joss, if people want to check the podcast out, I take it they can get it wherever they get their podcast, right?
Correct. Yes.
Oh,
if you know where to get a podcast, you'll know where to find this one. A Cup of Happy.
Lovely. Joss, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, darling.